Commission Member Charles Ellis, Vice Chair Joe Nix, Commission Member Bill Weibel, and Commission Member Fran Mastero. For voting members today, Fran, you will be the alternate, and the vote in case there's somebody that
Sure.
determines not to vote at some point. The first item on the agenda is a public hearing on a notice of intent to demolish a significant building at 23 Standish Road in Orleans, Massachusetts. I'll call the public hearing to order. This hearing is held under Chapter 106 of the Orleans Bylaws, demolition of an historic structure. And we have the application to submit to demolish the building. Matt, you'll be representing the owners at the meeting. Could you just identify yourself for the record?
Sure, thank you. So Matt Cole from Cape Associates for the applicant. With me on the Zoom is Eliza Cox. So when you're ready, I'll make a presentation, and then Eliza's going to add in some additional at the end to round out the presentation, if that's okay.
Okay, great. Okay, this meeting is held, as I said, under Chapter 106, which covers buildings that are determined as significant. And I just want to quote a couple of sections from the bylaw, because Matt, you had raised some issues in your cover letter to the application. The reason we are holding this hearing is that this building is a significant building under the terms of the bylaw, and I want to quote for the record what that is, and that is any building or portion thereof which is not within a regional or local historic district subject to regulation under the provisions of the Massachusetts General Law 40C or special act of the legislature, and this next section is the key, but which is included in the historical property survey of the town of Orleans and on file with the Massachusetts Historical Commission. Now, that's the basic definition of buildings that are covered by this bylaw. The word after that is very important because it says "or." And what follows is a list of alternative ways that a building not listed on the inventory can be covered. And there we get into the building being built before or prior to 1920, and a number of other conditions are then listed, or that had been previously determined by a vote of the commission to be significant. Neither of those apply there, but the basic definition covers the eligibility, so to speak, of this building under the bylaw. The building is listed on a Form A, which covers Nauset Heights. It's mentioned, I believe, several times in that Form A. And the Nauset Heights area has been determined as being eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. So with that introduction, we'll proceed, and I'll turn it over to Matt. Joan and I did do a quick visit to the site, and we'll report on that as we go along. But Matt, if you want to take over.
Sure. So thank you again, Matt Cole for the applicant. This is an interesting situation, a property that I've spent a lot of time researching to try to understand, and so I both think that the property, I think there's good evidence that the structures on 23 Standish were built after 1920, not on or before, and also that the structures on there are not significant. And so I just want to walk through some of the history, if we could, some of which is outlined in the application, but I have some additional documents that I want to share to make sure that the point is made. So the property is owned by a family that also owns the abutting property, number 21, and so I'm sure at some point I'll get the numbers reversed. But both 21 and 23 were sort of painstakingly permitted for redevelopment, each separately, but at a concurrently back in 2017. And so there were various public hearings, including this commission hearing an application for 21 Standish at that time, and in or about 2017. During all of those hearings, so again, that included Conservation Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals for both properties, and again, David Little was the property owner's representative at that time, and he took them through all of the boards simultaneously. And so at that time, and I'll share the zoning board applications with you to pass around. So I'm sharing both the applications from 2017 for both 21 Standish and 23 Standish. And mind you, all of these approvals have since been repeated this year because those approvals lapsed and they had to be done all again. So life changed in the interim. They didn't proceed with the project right away when everything was approved in 17, so they had to go back through this whole process again. But David, who's very careful in marching through the steps in 2017, did some amount of investigation as to which properties had to come before this board and brought 21 before the board. For a reason that we can't find record of, 23 was not determined to need to come through this process back then. So I'm unclear why that was and why it's different now. But those are the two applications, and you can see where this board was noted as required for the 21 property. One of the things, so again, in the town records, and having studied everything from the building department's file to the assessor's file pretty thoroughly, there's clearly no record of exactly when these structures were built, which is not uncommon for buildings of this age. There's a plan of the subdevelopment from 1915 that shows structures on some of the lots in the neighborhood, but shows the subject lot empty in 1915. In 1928, the property was at that time transferred to Kerry Warner. So I think when you read through, I'd have to call it up, but I think when you read through the Nauset Heights file in the Mass Historical, there's a reference to this property. There's no photos of it. There's no individual property card. There's a reference to the property, and it's referred to as the Warner Cottage. So in all of my research on the property and marching back through the deed history, 1928 is the first time that I found that somebody with the name Warner owned the property. Anyhow, in the registry, referring to that deed, it refers to transferring a lot of land. And so, not understanding, certainly I wasn't alive back then, what the normal course of nomenclature or description on the deeds, if you read, and of course I printed two sides, but so you got to flip it over, but on the very next deed, which has nothing to do with this property, nothing to do with anything other than it's literally the next deed that was recorded at the registry, it talks about land with buildings thereon. So I think that establishes that most likely there was no building on the property in 1928. I did find an aerial photo from 1938 that did show the structures there. So I would submit that the structures were built somewhere between 28 and 38. So part of some of the confusion about this property is that there was the oldest record that I found anywhere here in the town was an assessor's card from 1976, which I shared in the application package, and it prints out faintly. If you call it the microfiche slide on the assessor's site, it's very, very clear. Year built is 1920 plus or minus. Well, fields of data can only take certain characters, and at some point the plus or minus was dropped. This was a handwritten note back in 1976, 1920 plus or minus. So when records became typed, the plus or minus was dropped at some point, and somewhat erroneously it's been captured there forward as having been built in 1920, which doesn't appear to be the case. Again, in researching the Warner name and the history of the property, the structures there, I couldn't find any significant history, any significance to that family or the inhabitants or the use of the property. So I think with that, unless there's questions on what I've presented so far, again, I'm a little unclear why this got flagged this year as needing to come through this process when it looks pretty clearly like it wasn't flagged back in 2017. It looks like it wasn't built in 1920 or prior. I find no evidence that the houses or the structure, again, there's a single-family house and a detached garage. I can't find in any of the records that there's any significance to that structure or the Warner family that, again, the Nauset Heights listing describes it as. So I'll pause for a minute and let Liza jump in.
Great, thank you, Matt. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes. Could you identify
Okay,
yourself again and your affiliation with the...
Yes, absolutely. For the record, my name is Eliza Cox. I'm an attorney with Nutter, McLennan and Fish in Hyannis. I am actually covering for my colleague, Sarah Toronto Flores, who's been involved in the re-permitting that Matt described of this property. And I apologize that I'm not there in person. I had an accident in August and I'm still recovering, which prevents me from being in person, but I'm pleased to be a part of this meeting. I wanted to take a few minutes and sort of hone in on the definition of significant that the chair referenced earlier in the meeting and explain why we think now and in 2017 this wasn't considered significant for the purposes of coming before this commission. So the chair correctly noted, and I agree with the reading, that the definition of significant sort of has two parts. There's sort of the first clause that the chair quoted and then the second clause that Matt referred to. But in the first clause of the definition, it provides that a significant building is one that is listed in both the Historical Property Survey of the Town of Orleans and on file with Mass Historical Commission. Here, my understanding, and from speaking with my colleague as well, who's done a lot more permitting in Orleans than I have, we understood that the Historical Property Survey of the Town of Orleans was a three-ring binder that was basically kept in the building department and that contained all of the Form A inventories from the Mass Historical Commission for every property that was individually inventoried. This property does not have an individual Form A for it, as we know from the MACRIS, the MHC website. So it would not have been in the book as we understand it. Therefore, because that first part of the definition requires it both be in the book, which I understand is no longer, and you may have other evidence, but our understanding is no longer existing because of the Macris website being updated, that this three-wing binder doesn't exist in the building department anymore. But unless it's listed in both places, then it wouldn't be significant under the first clause of that definition. The second clause of the definition has other considerations. I think the threshold one being, as Matt mentioned, whether the structure was constructed in or before 1920. If it wasn't constructed under that second clause in or before 1920, then it's not considered significant within the meaning of the bylaw. And as Matt explained, and as is referenced in the notice that was filed to bring us here this afternoon, based on our review of the history, we do not believe that this building was constructed in or before 1920, and therefore wouldn't be significant under the definition. And then I guess finally, and then we'll turn it to questions and comments, but I would just reiterate that this recent history from 2017 on the property that, again, is described in the narrative, and as Matt mentioned, does indicate that the lack of an application for this site back in 2017 was not an oversight or a mistake. Back in 2017, every step was taken in the permitting process in tandem with this site and also 21 Standish Road simultaneously. And given the evidence that is in the record that is described in our notice, it seems that most likely at that time a decision was made at that time that the bylaw wasn't triggered for this property because it was not in the survey, individually inventoried, nor was it built on or before 1920, and therefore it didn't meet the definition of significant within your bylaw to bring it to you. And so, again, as Matt mentioned, it's our position that this is not a significant building within the meaning of your bylaw. And I'll pause there.
Okay, any questions or comments, responses?
Are there tax records for this property?
That-
How far back do they go?
Yeah, so that 1976 assessor's card that's in the application
Right.
is the oldest tax record
So
available for the property.
that's what I mean, there's nothing
Prior to that,
prior
no.
to that.
No, so they just digitized all their records, and when you go through the file for this property, that's the oldest one, and then you follow it forward, and in years subsequent to 76, the plus or minus goes away, and that's where it becomes incorrectly cemented as being built in 1920, which is not true.
Matt, do you have anything to say about the building itself? Is there anything distinctive about this structure? Are there others like it? Is this, what are we losing if this goes away?
Yeah, so you're losing a house that is in poor condition, continues to be used, it's been rented out, it's very much a useful house, but that is not up to today's standard. It's covered in lead paint, it's not original windows, there's vinyl windows, there'd be very little of the exterior fabric that could retain, even if the structure were retained and it were renovated.
That's kind of not my question, because everything you just said could be true of the house Paul Revere was born in, for example. So I'm more curious about, is there something distinctive about this, not irrespective of its current condition, that the history of it, either architecturally or otherwise, that you know of?
I found nothing to indicate so.
Could I just also note that in the Mass Historical form for the district, it does, in that form, list what it considered the key and representative properties, and then describes each of the properties. This one is not in there, unlike 21 Standish, which was previously before this commission. It lists, a whole host of different sites and describes them, but not this one.
But it is a part
It
of
is listed.
it's part of the National Register eligible district,
It's part of Nauset Heights,
right?
is what you're saying.
Correct.
Yes, which was considered eligible for the National Register, and that's why it's significant with a capital
Right, but it's
S.
not individually listed, and it's not listed in the Heights description as a key or one of the key or representative properties which are summarized on the.
I agree with you,
continuation.
but that doesn't mean that it isn't a part of the district.
Right.
And by listing in Macris, it is a part of our survey. Our, meaning Orleans' survey.
So,
And
I
actually, I
wanted
would,
to ask about.
I would just
that.
like to make a correction here. It actually is listed on
It's
page,
not-
continuation sheet 17, property number 166 is 23 Standish Road. And under architectural significance in the narrative, it's also mentioned. And that is on continuation sheet 9, up near the top of the page, and a number of structures are listed as being architecturally significant, and 23 Standish Road is listed as the Warner Cottage. So it is mentioned twice in the Form A.
So I think the sheet on 17, that's a listing of all of the structures that are within the district, in the geographical district.
And again, that heading was careful to note that it's an estimated date of construction. Again, the records
Yeah.
aren't perfect enough to represent that that date is accurate.
It's an
Mr.
either or
Chairman, I had a
thing.
question. Does this commission have the historical property survey of the town of Orleans? That actual book or document?
That book or document, the historical survey of Orleans is a living, breathing document. It's not a static book. From time to time, over the years, books have been prepared and have been used, but the historic inventory for the town of Orleans, and one that's been recognized for some time, are those properties which have been received and accepted by the Massachusetts Historical Commission and appear on Macris, either on Form A's, which are area forms, or Form B's, which are individual forms
The buildings.
for buildings, yeah.
And our survey also includes Form Bs, which have been prepared, but Macris hasn't gotten up to uploading.
Which doesn't impact this.
It doesn't impact this, because this has been uploaded and appears on Macris.
I have another question that's, I guess, kind of just basic. Macris lists two buildings on this property, the other one's a garage. Are we talking about both buildings that are
Correct.
still there?
Yes.
John, can you talk about the property? You said you did a review
Yeah,
on.
Ron and I met at the property and walked around it and admired the view. It is a classic craftsman bungalow-style home, shingle siding, detached garage. As far as I know, it has been rented as recently as this summer. It's not falling apart.
Well, it must have been in decent enough shape to rent it, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's closed to the elements and, yeah,
Okay.
we did not,
There's no neglect.
no, we did not enter inside. I mean, just so people know, we had permission to walk around the property, which we did.
So I got a question. It appears to me that what's being presented here is that there isn't definitive evidence it was built before 1920, though it might have been. There's not evidence it was built after 1920, but it might have been. And we're asked to take the side that it was, since it can't be proven either way, to assume that it's not eligible. And that's what we're being asked to do, if I understand.
I think the first is a question, why was it determined to not be significant in 2017? And then
That's
second.
not-
Well, that could have been missed.
That
We've had
wasn't-
stuff missed
yeah, that
before. That's
wasn't
not the first
referred-
time something's
And that
been
wasn't
missed.
referred.
Sure, but the abutting property was before you, having gone through multiple noticed public
But
hearings.
it may never have gotten, Ron, tell me if I'm right, these things come to you after they're submitted, and somebody, when they submitted this stuff to the chair at that point in time, may have meant to list two properties and only listed one and went forward, or they may have missed it. I mean, it could be either way. The fact is, I don't think we know.
Yeah,
What is the date on the Macris thing? Is that
which the
the Form A?
Oh, it's
we were just looking
fairly
at.
recent, like 2017,
I think it was like 17, wasn't it?
yeah. Yeah, I had checked the record, I don't have.
It was received in July of 2018.
2018.
So possibly that's
Approved, but it
why.
was- Yeah, in terms of whether it came before the committee, I didn't see a record of it. It may not have been referred, but it wasn't demolished. Was an
No, no.
application, are you saying that an application was submitted to demolish this building in 2017? Is that?
Correct, it's the same sort of raise and replace. Right now is substantially the same plan as what was fully permitted, shovel-ready in 2017.
And did your record show that the demolition delay was imposed, or?
No.
Only on 21.
Yeah, which I do recall that one, and we do have the record for 21. We have consistently imposed the demolition delay on demolitions in the Nauset Heights area. We just did one a couple of months ago. What was that?
It was- Yeah, this one.
And what happens with the demolition delay, if we impose a demolition delay, the year expires, the owner then has 2 years to demolish the building. If they don't demolish the building, then the findings expire and the process needs to
Starts
start
over.
over again. But that was 20, that clarifies it in my mind, then you're not claiming that 23 Standish Road has had a previous hearing.
No, 23 has not, and I
Yeah,
think it was
that's-
specifically and purposefully skipped over as both properties went lockstep through every approval in 2017 very carefully, and 21 was referred, 23 wasn't. I think that was done very purposefully and thoughtfully because the property wasn't 100 years old. It wasn't built on or before 1920. I think the deed clearly shows that it was an empty lot in 1928. In fact, the lot as it stands today is the combination of three separate lots that were combined over time.
Well, can we just go back and clarify that whether or not it was built in 1920 before or after is totally irrelevant in accordance with the bylaw? And do you have that one that I highlighted?
So here's why I think it's relevant. I think that the property for some time now, since the late 70s, has been mistakenly classified as a home built in 1920, and it wasn't. And so it's listed here in that Nauset Heights registry with that same incorrect information. And I see it's an easy mistake that was made by sort of lopping off the plus minus.
Yeah, well, the exact dates of construction in many Orleans buildings are not certain. We've had that come up before, and I think I can't, the demolition delay bylaw was written 20-some years ago, so I can't get into the heads of the people that wrote it, but, that's why the year of construction is just not even included in the basic definition of what comes under section, chapter 106.
I mean, clearly it is of the same style and of the same construction type as the neighboring 21 Standish. Perhaps the two were constructed in different years, but very similar architecturally.
Oh, I don't think so.
So
And-
if you're
and-
looking at, from the water, if you were looking toward the land, the house to 23 Standish's on the right
Yep,
is 21, yes?
on the right, white trim is 21, yep.
From the water.
Two-story structure, white trim, right, that's 23. 21 is the single-story bungalow built before 1915, green trim.
Yes, but what I'm saying is actually, that doesn't matter. What I'm saying is, this is a part of the National Register eligible Nauset Heights filed with a Form A for an area with Macris, and it therefore is significant. And it's significant in terms of, because it contains this large collection of bungalows, of which this is one. So we can quibble about whether it was constructed in we know it was constructed by 1938, right, because it's
Correct.
visible in the historic aerial. It doesn't appear to be constructed in 1928 based on this deed,
Right.
but that's great information for us to have, but it's not pertinent to whether it's significant.
Any other comments or questions? I would just quote for the record, that, you know, this house, when you talk about historical significance, I think we would be the first to agree that, you know, Paul Revere didn't sleep in the house, and nothing historically significant occurred there, which is the case in many of the cases we review. But the reason this is historically significant, and this is in the eligibility statement, is that the building represents the architectural styles and the look and the feel of the area, and the specific, it says in the area of architecture as an intact area that incorporates multiple architectural styles that were popular in the early to mid-20th century, including Craftsman colonial and colonial revival houses. As a whole, the Nauset Heights area possesses the integrity of location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. So that's the criteria that we're looking at for Nauset Heights. And our decision would be based on whether or not this building contributes to that look and the feel and the atmosphere that's present on Nauset Heights.
From your investigation of the structure, is there any possibility that building was moved there? Because they moved buildings
Right.
around during
Right.
that period of time, a lot of them.
Nothing that I remember seeing, and I've been in and out of there over the years,
Okay.
leads me to think that, but I wouldn't want to give you an answer as to that opinion without revisiting it to look through that lens.
Okay.
Nothing that I saw in the research indicated that it might be moved from somewhere else.
Do you have a copy of this? I have the section highlighted, but just for your, you know, we review, I don't want to say many, but more than a few buildings that were built after 1920. There's no requirement that the building has to be built before 1920 to be placed on the inventory.
Right, but wouldn't mistaking its date of construction lead others to conclude that it was significant in a way that it may not be?
I don't
I don't think so. It was the early to mid-19th century, or early to mid-20th century. was the time period
Yeah,
alluded to, so whether it's 1920 or 1928 or 1929 or 36 isn't relevant.
Well, as the years go by, the dates are gonna move anyway,
Yeah.
by definition.
yeah.
Right.
Date of construction is always a funny number anyway, because lots of buildings are started and they're finished the following year, or 3 years later,
Right,
or half finished,
right.
sit that way for 10 years, and then someone comes and finishes and puts an addition on it at the same time. So date of construction is a fuzzy time in any case.
Well, we found with the consultant that's redoing the Form Bs, one by one throughout the town, over the years, on a number of them, the information that was in there in the past was incorrect, and as he can, he's correcting them, but
Yeah.
it's not unusual for there to be bad information on some of the history.
Yeah.
And do you look at properties differently depending on location and visibility?
What do you mean?
Do you look at a structure differently if it's in a location in the center of town versus on the, where it can't be seen? Does any of that determine importance?
At times, we've considered the streetscape, yes.
It depends on the building itself, and this home, 23 Standish, is somewhat visible from the street, although not fully. It's not something that's prominent from the street, but streetscape is also from the water.
Public
The view
view.
for public view is the significance. And we have a list of approximately 7 or 8 factors that we consider, not as a checklist or a cookbook, but that we consider as a whole in determining whether or not to designate a building as historically significant.
Mhm. Again, I'm sure you saw it, but in the package, the last 2 photos that I shared were taken from the water's edge below the property, which is actually part of the property, and then from the street. And again, through the conservation process, any modifications there, they're asking for the structure to be moved back. So in the redevelopment plan, the house would be moved back significantly,
That was-
so.
We were a little confused, that was staked out on the property when we were
Pro-
there.
probably,
So it
yeah.
seems to be slid backwards and a little bit closer to one property line.
It can't move closer, it's already as close, but yes, it is significantly moving back away from the edge of the bank, which was
There were line of
their
stakes
requirement.
down the side. Some of them had labels on them that were setback labels. It wasn't
Limit
completely
of
clear
work,
where the new.
setback, house, there's a bunch of stuff staked out there, yes, it's very confusing.
Mr. Chairman, I know one of the board members asked if Matt knew whether this building had been moved to this site rather than constructed. Would it be helpful to the commission if we continued this to try to find that information out? Would that impact the decision?
I don't see where that's relevant.
No,
No.
probably not.
No, I think maybe that was looking for an explanation of how it could have been built before the date the property was transferred. I think that would have been one way to,
Oh,
so I think if anything, it would have worked in the other direction, if that's true.
Right.
I wanted to check for public comment. There is no public in the room here, but I wanted to check online. Is there anybody that's on the Zoom call that wants to make a public comment here?
We have 3 attendees on Zoom, but no hands are currently raised.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, what sort of are the options moving forward for us at this point then?
Well, the bylaw restricts the historical commission to making a decision within 45 days of the application. So we need to determine today whether or not to impose the one-year demolition delay under Chapter 106. And we'll take a vote on that shortly. Beyond that, if new information comes up, the demolition delay period can be shortened if there's new information or other considerations. And those are basically the options. This bylaw is fairly simple.
And can I ask what have been other examples where the delay's been imposed but then shortened with new or additional information? Is there information that could be provided that would allow that to happen?
One structure was, instead of demolished, was moved on site.
Yeah, so it wasn't so much that the delay was.
It was partial, they took off one piece of the
Yeah,
house, and the majority of the house was moved on the site and maintained.
So basically, the permission, the demolition application was withdrawn effectively, except for that main part of the house.
Right.
So it wasn't really that the delay was shortened, it just that it became moot because they decided to keep the
Right.
and move it. That was a recent one. So normally, it's in your interest to get the demolition delay started, because if nothing changes, at least you're starting the clock and when you can do something with it. So that's one thing to consider. And I might ask if it makes any difference to the owners whether we include garage or exclude it. I don't know if we could do that or would do that. but I'm
The
just
application is
asking
for both
For
structures.
both structures. You wouldn't care if it was, if the garage was left off of the delay. I don't know if we consider doing that or not, but I'm just asking it as a hypothetical. Would make any difference to you one way or the other.
There's an outcome I didn't consider. I'd have to think about that for a minute.
And was there ever any consideration by the owners of modifying the existing structure by putting additions on and rehabilitating the original structure as opposed to demolishing it and starting over? I mean, those are the kinds of things that would mitigate a demolition delay. And in other cases, other kinds of cases where people have come forward with saving the core structure of the historic building, or parts, at least parts thereof, and demolishing additions and doing, in cases like that, the delay has not been imposed. Where a bona fide effort is made to save all or part of the initial, the initial structure.
Yeah, so I can't answer that specifically, other than to say, when you look at the amount of modifications that would need to be made to that structure to make it code compliant, to bring it back away from the bank as the Conservation Commission requires, and then to expand it to facilitate the use that the family wishes, you're talking about substantial work, and I think it would be both expensive and transformative to what's there. And in fact, the structure would need to be in a whole new location to move it back further from the bank, as the commission requires.
I don't think that, if you left what was there and added to it, conservation couldn't, I don't think, demand that you move the whole house back.
They do
Because
all the time.
It's there now.
They do all the time. I wish that were true.
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments, or are we ready for a motion?
I move we consider the structure preferably preserved, and therefore institute a one-year demolition delay.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Not voting? 500.
501, right?
No,
Oh, no, 5-0, because
I'm not
he's
in the mix.
Oh, you're
an
not.
alternate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Well, that was interesting. Different,
Who's in the waiting room?
So we have to close the hearing?
Who's in the waiting room?
yeah, I think,
Watching.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that one.
we will, I would declare the public hearing closed, and we'll reopen the regular historical commission meeting at this point. And I think the only other major thing we need to discuss, just maybe what we'll do, take a look, before we get into the discussion. Charles, is there anything new on CPC to report?
No, all of our applications are in. There's one other, the Cho's application in, and as of last Thursday, no other applications have been received that I'm aware. As of last Thursday, there had been no other applications, and nothing else has been surfaced since that time period. But I would assume whoever's going to, the people who are going to apply, they'll come in the next week or two, next couple of weeks.
Sorry, what was the other one you said was in?
Cho.
Cho.
Cho is in.
Okay. And then.
And Cho will come back in front of this committee for
That's
approval,
the
though
focus.
it's the same thing.
Okay.
It doesn't matter, it's the same, it's virtually the same as what it was last time.
And, okay, so we should begin, I guess, at our December meeting, we should bring in,
Yeah, once we know that, and we know how much more there is, in addition to that, I believe that the Historical Commission applications, that CPC will ask them to come in front and present in December, which I don't think is really much of a problem in terms of that stuff. But I believe that they'll be asked to come in earlier versus later.
so outside of the Historical Commission applications that we submitted, which we're all aware of, there's Cho and what other,
But we have four of them,
four?
and there's Cho, nothing else as we speak.
Nothing
Not
else?
as
Okay,
we
there's
speak, as
nothing
of
else.
last Thursday.
Okay.
Nothing else had been submitted.
Oh,
There
so it's
there will
only
be a
one.
number.
Okay.
There'll be a number.
And from what I understand, the Cho application is identical to last year?
I haven't actually opened the two up and looked at it. So it was verbalized that it's the same, but I actually haven't compared the two of
Okay.
them side by side.
Okay. So it wouldn't be a major investigation on our part as to...
No, I think our thing will go very quickly, and I
Yeah.
believe the opinion that we get from Eric can be pro forma, or we may not even, if it is the exact same application, I probably would recommend we don't even get a new opinion from him, because we
Okay.
have one from last year.
Yeah, yeah. So, and this year's this year, we really don't have much need for Eric's input into, if that's the case, if none of it
Well, we don't know what
comes
else is going to be historical that'll show
forward.
up.
Yeah, okay,
I mean, that could be, the answer is we don't know.
yeah.
The only issue would be if Cho changed anything after we talked about it last year.
Well, I can tell you that
I mean, I'd like to see
that
what
I can
version
tell you
they're
that the
bringing.
color in the front of it is not the same color it was last year. It's been changed. You know, if you remember that conversation when we had it in terms of what they're doing. So, we'll look at it, but I can
Yeah.
tell you, it looked to me like they made the changes from the first meeting we had last year. That's what it looked, without going through it in detail.
Yeah. And one question I had, maybe I missed something, but the application that Fran submitted for retaining Eric's services for reviewing CPC applications, replacing the
Yeah.
administrative funds, now that's next year's funds. Those are funds that would become available to us next July.
That's correct.
Is CPC intending to use administrative funds again this year?
Yes.
For that purpose, okay.
Yeah, that was the discussion. And a couple people asked what that application was for, and I mentioned it was administrative funds, and everybody just nodded their head and said, oh, okay, I understand.
Okay, well, then I guess, Courtney had submitted the minutes a while back from the last meeting. I didn't
Can-
bring my copy, but does anybody have any changes?
No, but I wanted to get to number 2 because I want to go to the select board meeting here shortly. That's all.
Okay, well, does anybody have any?
I didn't have any. They were good.
I didn't have any.
Minutes, okay, motion to accept the minutes from the October meeting.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Aye, opposed, not voting, 500. Okay, Bill, did you have something you wanted to?
Well, item number 2 on our agenda where we talk about the discussion of the commission and the future of the historic district project.
Yeah, that's what we're going back to now.
Yeah. So I just wanted to give a bit of a report on the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting this morning that addressed issues related to Main Street, which they hope to bring to the select board some alternative or options for them to consider for capital outlay just for the engineering. And the options run upwards of $9 million to create sidewalks on both sides of the road, as well as perhaps some other additional bike lanes and/or multi-purpose things. The disruption to the historical streetscape, I think, as I've ridden, and all of us have, and walked it, will become somewhat profound. And so I think it ties into our discussion along this line. So I just wanted to let you know a little bit about what the discussion was. They hope to have overlay engineering plans available in a preliminary fashion, I believe, for the December Select Board meeting, if not then by January.
Where are they starting and ending this
They're going to start at
sidewalk?
the Methodist Church and end at the Barley Neck.
On both sides of the street?
Yes.
Wow.
So they'll be encroaching upon or taking quite a bit of property land.
They, well, the town in this instance has a laid-out road, unlike Beach Road, which is not laid out. So they have some latitude
Right.
to presume that one of the hedges, or that big hedge that we encountered just before the new development there on the right, I believe that would be gone. So at what expense? So this $9 million addresses the moving and removal and of all of the utilities, of the construction, et cetera, et cetera.
So it does not involve, if I'm hearing you correct, any potential, any theoretical taking of property.
No.
Okay. That's what I thought you said.
Does it involve streetlights?
Pardon me?
Are there streetlights proposed, or is that,
I believe so, and that's why, we don't know.
it's not designed yet, right?
Not designed yet.
But, and if they're doing it on the, past the whole cemetery,
They're gonna have to either cut that bank away, they wanna have a 5-foot sidewalk where the cemetery is. So I don't know whether
A
it
huge
requires
retaining
moving
wall.
that wall or moving the roadway.
and there's a whole line of trees there.
Correct.
Would there be
Wow.
defined bike path? I mean, would there be like pylons or anything separating the bike path from the road?
To me, until you get commit the 300,000 to do an engineering study, this is an advisory committee. It has little authority other than to bring before the select board all of this. And they have not solicited from anyone on Main Street input. So I can't wait for that.
So if I'm interpreting this is a hugely transformative project
Yes.
to the area.
The other thing that I don't know, and so there's a preliminary master plan that has yet to be approved by the planning board.
It's not finished yet.
That's what I mean.
Right.
So I'm curious as to where this dovetails with that, if it does.
Well, you know, the Economic Development Committee has as a goal improving pedestrian and bike access
Right.
to the beach. That is one of their goals.
Good.
So, I'm also surprised that the other study is 85,000, right, from Beach Road to the.
Well, that's
Long Beach
just a
Road.
feasibility study. That's not an engineering.
So this 300,000 is engineering fee?
Yeah, it's been earmarked by a previous town meeting
Wow.
as
And it's
a
just sitting out
capital
there
outlay.
waiting?
Hmm?
And
Yep.
it's just sitting there?
Yep, it's just sitting
Unspent
there.
You know, the,
funds. Wow.
Good to know.
Labeling this as economic development seems a little bit, I won't use the crude term, but the horse is before the cart, or the cart is before the horse, because the town property values have exploded over the last few years. So the argument that investment has to be made to economically develop this town, it is not consistent with what we're seeing before us. What really is happening is an effort to create attractive living surroundings for parts of the town, which is a noble and worthwhile wish, but that can only happen by extracting revenues from the town. So that is, by definition, by creating more debt, by creating a greater tax load, that can impair economic development over the long term. Look, this is not the purview of this committee, but I'm just amazed at the ambition for this town right now, particularly after this land purchase and other things that are on the docket.
I stood up and I recognized, introduced myself and member of the Historic Commission, and I asked this question. I said, is it the understanding of this committee that you anticipate that the demographic of Orleans in the next 10 years will look different than it does today? I said, the demographic in Orleans has been the oldest demographic in the Commonwealth for about the last 30 years. Do you think it's going to change? Well, we hope so. And I thought, oh, good. Because to create bike lanes, to provide alternative means of transportation, I think is admirable. But I'm not sure it's going to really serve the needs of the residents who are here. As we age in place, the affordability of this community becomes less and less. I just wonder as to how are we addressing the needs? Pickleball would be, for me, a better expense than what we're thinking about. That's all. But, I'm just.
I think part of the issue is the intention is to create lots and lots of missing middle housing, so-called, for younger people than currently live here,
Mhm.
who I guess they assume want to walk and ride bikes to the beach.
Maybe.
And they're all going to be located along Main Street in East Orleans.
Well, like in any
I mean,
bit,
it's a targeted destination.
well, like any economic project, there's a cost and there's the cost versus benefit.
Right.
I have no doubt that there's some benefit. Question is, does it make sense versus the cost?
What's the present value of the benefit?
Yeah.
It's
What's
pushed
the
out.
ROI
When people don't
on
have
this?
places to live, where those children are going to be sleeping, we're building out the creature comforts for a generation that can't arrive.
Right.
And I'd say, let's get to work on that project on 6A, the old hotel or
Underground.
whatever and make that into something.
Yeah.
Instead of worrying about bike lanes, for crying out loud, that are gonna cost millions of dollars. And like I say, been struck by the ambitions of this town that are going like this. I sit on another commission, I won't mention it, which wants more money to give away. And it's amazing, there's a crude correlation with what we've just gone through in the country that seems to have infected everybody's thinking, which is, let's go for it, and without looking behind you.
Yeah.
Anyway, like I said, this is not,
But I think
our committee
all
is
of this
worrying about other
impacts on
things,
what
but
we want to do with the study committee.
Ron, I'd like,
Yeah,
if I
that's-
could, to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, okay, well, we just, before we do, just let me introduce the topic, and you know, I think we need to continue the discussion of what's gonna happen with the district and with the study committee, but with the caveat that the decisions as to where the district goes and what we end up doing is solely in the jurisdiction of the study committee. But the historical commission has an interest. We're partners in this, and it's an appropriate place for us to continue the
Well,
discussion.
can I bring a report then from the Historic District Study Committee to
Yes,
the Historical
yeah.
Commission? So at the last meeting, we as a study committee decided to suspend our attempt to have a local historic district vote at town meeting in May. And instead, we were going to finish the preliminary study report if we could find the money to pay the consultant to do so. We were gonna continue to go ahead and get the map made by the Historical Commission. And we were gonna ask to be on the select board agenda. And the concept was that we would go to the select board and say, we are suspending work on this historic district based on the rather resounding defeat at town meeting and by our feeling that we don't have a groundswell of support. But what I wanted to bring to the Historical Commission is that the map is now complete. So 2 days ago, we finally got a map. It properly prints at 11 by 17, but at 8.5 by 11. So this would go in the preliminary study report. And we have a draft bylaw that we've all, that the Historic District Committee has ready to go into a report. So I'd like to officially send those to the Historical Commission as a partial.
Joan, I'd like you to
report.
ask you to hold on that a little bit. Unfortunately, I was not able to meet the last meeting. I do have some strong point of views about some of that, and I will want to make some changes in the bylaw when we do the meeting. It's not to be done here, but I do think there's some things that need to be changed, and I would just like to put that on hold. There's another meeting in a week or two, and I will make sure that I make that meeting, and I'll make my points, and people will either agree or not agree. But I would like to have the chance. I'd like to do that before we move forward to the next step.
We'd be happy to have you come.
I understand. I just missed it. It didn't get on my calendar, and I just missed it.
You know, compelling evidence that there is a path forward.
Well, I want to speak for a couple minutes because
But
I understand what happened. So I downloaded and listened to the town meeting. There was a presentation made at CPC by a number of people against the district. And there's been a
how
large...
many people spoke at CPC?
4 people.
Oh.
And there's been a large amount of social media that's been published. And I've got some concerns, and I want to deal with it. If nothing else, I'm going to deal with it personally in terms of editorials to the newspapers. But I actually think that the committee should think about it. There's been allegations that Department of Interior, let me go to the end and I'll come back to in the middle. There have been a number of different things that have been said that are simply untrue. And I don't believe the town had in front of them the facts of what's being proposed and taking place. So that's the end of it when I finish what I'm saying. My point of view. There's been an allegation that Department of Interior standards were going to be imposed on individual households. That's not true. There's been an allegation that the district would manage things like windows, doors, color of houses. That's not true. There's been an allegation that deed restrictions would be put on individual homes. That's not true. There's a comment that it would hinder commercial development, and it is unlikely that the district would regulate commercial development. That one is a little more nuanced, but I think it should be untrue at the end of the process. There's been an implication that it would hurt home values. I think that's not true. The fact that there was when the town voted, the fact that there had been a survey that had been put in place that had majority support. I forgot the percentage, but I know it's majority support of a district was not put in front of the town. The fact that the commission is doing minimal regulation, not maximal regulation, with total sensitivity to virtually everything other than demolition, though there's a couple other pieces that need to be dealt with, was not put in front of the town to vote. And I don't think the town had the ability to make an informed decision based on what was there. I wasn't at the meeting. I'll take part of the blame. I will also say that when it was presented, it was simply a procedural activity that was taking place to help finish the project, but also to represent the town in front of the State Historical Association and potentially the legislature after consultation with council. And it was not something, as what has been alleged on social media, to put in Department of Interior standards. So I think there's been a major misstatement. And by the way, I'm saying everything I'm saying knowing I'm being recorded, and knowing it may be, I'm saying it with that knowledge. And I think that I'm going to advocate that as a matter of public record, the district committee, next time we meet, put out a statement correcting what's been put out there. And I am more than willing to go in front of people that want to, such as the finance committee or select board or anybody, to correct the public record. Ultimately, the town has to approve this with a 2/3 vote. There's going to be people that don't like it, there's going to be people who do like it, and the town will make their decision. I just want the town to make a decision with facts, as opposed to allegations that are largely untrue.
Charles, I want to just back up what you said about the study committee questionnaire. It was 70% of the people who were asked if the study committee idea of a local historic bylaw that would be limited to review of demolition, new construction, and additions would be, if they were interested in that. And so 70% of the people we surveyed said yes.
Those are people in the district,
In the district.
not townwide.
That's right, in the district, and 15% said no, and 15% said not sure. So,
And I listened to the town meeting. I got into the recording and listened to it, and that there wasn't a hint that was true. That virtually nobody in that meeting even knew that had taken place.
well, I think Joan mentioned it briefly in her statement, but we certainly didn't get into the detail, and I don't remember. I was totally unprepared to have to speak, so I don't recall if I mentioned it or not.
And I was only prepared just in case.
Yeah.
I really thought it was rubber stamping of CPC's
Yeah.
recommendations, so
So I want to give you my point. There's always going to be people that are against something. The people who are against something speak much louder than the people that are for something. I think it's the obligation, if we want to move forward, and most of the people in this committee are also on the district committee, I think it's the obligation for us to speak and to speak loudly. and to say, well, so that the town, we owe it to the town, from my point of view, that the town is presenting with a clear set of facts. And that a small, and that a limited number of people, and the people who did speak at the meeting and at the CPC meeting were virtually the same people that spoke at the meeting we had, when we had a town meeting. It's a group of people. It's by no means a majority of the people in the district. And I think we owe it to both the people in the district and the people in the town to get accurate facts, to get accuracy out in front. That's my point of view.
Comments?
I think, Mike, I think all of us at the meeting that evening, like Joan said, thought it would be simply rubber stamped and CPC going forward. As I've said, New England Town Meeting is the last person with the last voice tends to carry the day. And to your point, when you're against something and you rally 4 or 5 people and the rest of the audience does not have in front of them the kinds of arguments that we can put forth, we didn't carry the day. Subsequent to that, informal conversations with lots of people say, oh, well, it ought to be revisited, and it's a marketing issue, and maybe another year, and, it's just, it runs down the line. But, so, I'm of the opinion that the last meeting we spoke of this, that we finish, we take it to the select board and sort of ask them, okay, so what is it you would like us to do? Because we have done our job.
Yeah, I agree with Charles with virtually everything you said. I think the strategy, though, Bill, is what you're saying, which is, I don't think it's an easy lift at this point. We couldn't get 50% for $10,000. I think we're gonna get 2/3 in a few months for the actual district.
So it's actually 2/3, 1/3,
2/3.
almost precisely.
It was? That voted
2/3
against?
against,
2/3
2/3 plus
against.
2 people.
Yeah.
So I don't think the people knew what they were voting for. That's my point of view.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And I
but
think they were voting for a historic district or not. That's what they were really.
That's what they were thinking on,
Right.
No,
yes.
but I don't think they understood.
I
I am
understand.
I
quite
agree with
sure
you.
they didn't understand that this was a minimalist district
Right.
that had virtually no,
Right.
that basically, other than demolition, was doing almost nothing. I know there's a couple nuances, but almost nothing. I don't think there's any understanding of that.
Not only that, but nobody ever presented the benefit side, the why would you want a historical district in the
Right.
first place? It
Right.
was never even presented.
We
So-
did not have a leadership support outside of this room.
Right, that-
to stand up in support of this.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, we can delay, we can do what we wish to do, but I think it belongs on somebody else's shoulders at this moment.
I agree with you, Bill. What I was gonna say was, I think the strategy should be to present the case, because we should do that, because we all agree that this would be a benefit to the town. So I think we ought to finish the preliminary report, make the case that we can, but make it to the select board that they have to pick up the mantle. If they want this thing to happen, they have to get behind it. But I think there's another thing that we should think about, which is that we've discussed this on and off before, but we all agree that the demolition delay bylaw is weak, and that we should do something about that, but we didn't want to complicate the historic district vote with something else. So I think what we should do, though, is use this. If it turns out that the town doesn't want the historic district, and nobody's going to pick up the mantle, and nobody's going to run with it, then we should be using this opportunity to talk about all the benefits of preserving history, so that when the time comes and we finally decide that, okay, we're not going in that direction, we're ready to use all that good effort about preserving, why history should be preserved, to get behind the other initiative that we want to do. So we should take advantage of this, that there's, I don't know, somebody said, don't let a good crisis go to waste.
Well,
Most of this discussion will take place at the district meeting. I do have some different point of views than other people, and I could speak a lot stronger in terms of what I think. And I think it's time, and fundamentally, I do think it's time to fight versus sit back. But I think that's a subject, the details of that's a subject of a different meeting. But I don't think this should be given up. And I don't think it should be tossed back quite the way which was being talked about. But
One issue
that's-
is we literally don't have the money.
I think we can get from one place to another until the next meeting, until the next meeting. I'm not saying we can get this in front in July, and it may be after that. But I think we can get from one place to another. Most of the basic work, Eric was going to go in front of the commission, whatever he's, into the state commission in terms
No.
of.
I mean,
He doesn't need to, he's not going to.
Okay,
they're not
but when we originally were, if you go back a couple meetings, he was going to. I don't think that needs to be done. I think most of the legwork's been done on the drafting of the law. The individual changes can take place, may not need his input in terms of doing that. And if we move implementation time back, then we could do it if we got additional money, and that would be a fight within CPC, and it will be a fight within CPC, which I'm prepared to do. But I think, so I think there's a path here. And I gotta tell you, I've got a real problem when people present things as true that are totally false. I've got a personal problem with that, and my inclination.
I'm not laughing at you, I'm just thinking about the last election.
My inclination is to fight back. But once again, the discussion for a different meeting, I think.
Well, I think we need to keep, what is our goal here?
Excuse me, I'm going to the select board meeting and listen to them.
Our goal is, our purpose here is to preserve the historic character of the community.
Right.
And I think we need to step back and say, what's the best path forward to accomplish that goal? And there's basically three things we can do. We can just say, okay, the heck with this, we're going ahead all full, damn the torpedoes, we're moving ahead and we're gonna get it on town meeting this May. The second is to back off and reconsider, because that's an enormous lift. I mean, that is just where we are now. This action at town meeting and at CPC, that really caused me to take a step back and look at the big picture here. And the third option that we have is to, at least for now, drop the district altogether. And pursue other items, pursue other avenues to preserving our town, the demolition delay, zoning regulations, public education, something we don't do enough of. So that's the big picture, and I think that's the main choice we have to make. I mean, I'm as annoyed as you are, Charles, about the disinformation and misinformation that was put out there, but I think we need to, take a look at how we're going to react to that
But
in
normally.
a way that keeps the main goal in mind.
Normally, most of the people in this committee think the same, and most votes are 5-0. I'm not sure that's gonna take place this time,
No, it probably won't.
because I strongly feel, I don't strongly feel we need to go forward in July, or in June or July, but I strongly feel that we need to advocate the case.
Well, it's May. It's May.
Or
is
May,
the
okay,
town
but
meeting,
I meant the same thing.
And, we have to have everything done by like February.
Right.
Right, so
so
our
I-
meetings would have to be in January, the public meetings that are required in the.
No, I have no
But first we
problem
have
with
to-
that, personally, no
But it
problem.
starts 60 days after we finish the preliminary report,
Right.
so we have to get, November 1st was when we wanted to finish the preliminary report. We've missed that already, so right now it would be very difficult, but right now, not impossible to get to May meeting, but very difficult.
I don't think we should try to get to the May meeting. I think we should move it back. I also think that given what's happened, that we need to take another look at the actual proposal about what we have there. And I think we need to have a conversation. That's why I don't want to publish a bylaw at this point in time, because I think we need to rethink out and make sure that what we're doing, listen, there may or may not be a district. If there is one ever, it's gotta be minimalistic.
It is,
Yeah, I think it needs to be more minimalistic than it is.
but people don't know it's minimalist.
They will, if we publicize it right, they will. And I think so I'll argue that at the next meeting, and people either agree or disagree with me, because that's the nature of dialogue and discussion. But I think we need to make it so minimalistic, to tell you the truth, I think it should only do demolition. Period, end of the conversation, and that's all it should do. So then there's a very simple thing, I think new additions should not be regulated, and I think, new construction, and I don't think large additions should be regulated. I think we just take them off the table, and we just do demolitions.
If that's the case, Charles, wouldn't it be better to do the demolition for the whole town?
You're not gonna get,
Well, you
and
can't,
all
singling anybody out.
you're gonna do with that is take it from 12 months to 18.
it's only gonna be a delay.
You're not gonna stop demolitions. I mean, do I think it should be 18 months instead of 12? Yeah, I do. But I don't think that's gonna make a huge difference. It'll make a little difference. I don't think it's gonna make a huge
So
difference.
you're saying in the historic district there'd be no demolition?
No, I didn't say that. That's not what we say, and we gotta be careful.
Oh.
What we say is if there's a demolition and it has to be submitted for approval, that it's subject to approval. It is not saying that there cannot be any demolitions.
I'm sorry, I misstated, but.
Well, that's what people are saying. and
Yeah,
that's-
but you're saying, but I guess I'm asking the difference between changing the demolition delay bylaw and doing what you're saying in the historic district, which is if the commission or the district commission says, no, you can't demolish that house, there's no timeline for that, that just is true.
permanent.
Yeah,
Can be
okay,
permanent.
period.
Right, and I said something in the stuff I sent to you guys, and I'll say it again, and I'm going to say it, I'm gonna say it in public and in press too. I grew up on the Delaware, Maryland shore. My aunt and uncle had a small cottage in Fenwick Island, which I don't know if people know it, but you basically got from Rehoboth right on up to Ocean City. In the last year or two, I still have friends and family down there, and I did the road from Rehoboth to Ocean City. And basically from Bethany, which is a little bit north of Rehoboth, and a little bit of Rehoboth, a little bit south of Rehoboth, and a 20-mile stretch that used to be cottages, historical cottages, similar to what we talked about on Nauset Heights, all gone. All gone. It looks like Miami Beach. It's all high-rises. If minimalistic regulation is not put into place, decision by decision by decision, people will make monetary decisions, individual monetary decisions, and the cultural and historical resources will be gone. I don't want this place to look like, where I grew up, in the Delaware, Maryland shore. And I'm sure if some type of restriction on demolition of historical structures are put into place, it will take place over time. It'll creep, but it will.
Well, if you're talking reducing or increasing the minimalism in the district to just demolitions, then we really need to consider going to a National Register district, because if we do that,
They don't prevent demolitions.
under the actions of regional import, the Cape Cod Commission prevent, on the Cape, it's the only place in the state, and I think in the country where that happens, but they'll step in and prevent a demolition.
But if you do local historic district and National Register, then you have local control instead of Cape Cod.
Yeah, that's the downside, but the upside.
No, that's the upside.
That's the upside, but the other side of that is with the National Register District, you have no town meeting, no 40C requirements, it completely excludes that. It depends on the state preservation officer being convinced that at least 50% or 51% of the people in the district approve of it.
Well, I think that's a discussion.
Yeah.
I do strongly feel that we should only be doing demolition, period. And my point of view, that's it.
Does anyone have any idea when the last time a district around the Cape was designated such, an historic district?
Local historic district?
Shadow.
Or is
No,
this-
no, not historic
Oh.
district, but I mean a national
National
register,
register.
sorry. Because, you know, if it's only a 51% vote, you could have some disgruntled people.
Well, I think that's
But
another-
That's finished.
Yeah.
I think it's another discussion. My inclination, but I could be definitely talked out of it once I have more facts in front of me. My inclination is just take all the work that we've done for all these years and make sure it's totally a minimal thing, and then actively go in front of the different people in the town and letting them know that this is as minimalistic as it is, and all it stops is demolition. My inclination is that we don't need to redo everything we've done. We can take what we've done and make a few tweaks, and then go that way. And I don't think anybody would be mistaken.
Does this master plan that's being put together include a historic district on Main Street? I mean, is there
It
a,
hasn't been adopted.
is it
I think it
penciled in,
will.
or,
We've provided input to that
We've-
effect.
so it's been proposed?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, I have this feeling that there are other ideas that are floating out there for development along that area,
Oh, yeah. Oh,
that
yeah.
we don't know the details of.
But
Right.
what was talked about in the meeting, and I did go to the person who came on, that was against it, and I believe the word used was commercial development at that point. And I would advocate zero regulation of commercial development other than demolition. Zero.
But an idea, and I'm not trying to be conspiratorial, but an idea that was different from what we're talking about, that might be, you know, another thing that's penciled in or being discussed, would depend upon demolition. Might depend upon demolition to execute. It might be.
Of residential or commercial?
Of residential. In order to find the space to accommodate something. Like I say, I'm really,
Well, let
Blue
me go,
sky.
let me go back. The
I'm
fact that
confused. You're saying
demolition,
if someone
well, the
wants to put
planning
in,
group that's discussing ideas now might also have an idea that is not necessarily prominent, but it might require demolition. So
But
a
the buy
historic
rate-
district that even minimal might be in the way there.
not necessarily. First of all, to buy residential, you're gonna have to take properties. The town's gonna have to buy properties to do that. That's a lot of money for that type of stuff. Now, it may be stuff like the old Katie's, which is commercial, and taking that and turning that into something, that could be true.
Right, or it could be higher density.
And I don't think that would
living.
be any problem, because don't forget, if demolition is reviewed, it doesn't mean it's rejected, it means it's reviewed. Okay, and if somebody wanted to come, if we were a commission right now, and somebody wanted to come in with the old Katie's thing and demolish that and put something else up, I don't want to speak for the whole commission, but I don't think anybody would have a real problem with that type of thing, as an example.
What if somebody proposed to put a McDonald's in there?
That wouldn't be our business.
Well, but it would certainly destroy the look and the feel and the historic district atmosphere that exists.
Yeah, well, first of all,
would
the other
become like-
commission in the town, commercial development is, what's the other?
Architectural
Architectural
review,
review. I think architectural review would deal with that.
well, our bylaw was leaving everything that is under architectural review.
Right. And then there was a question of what if they wanted to demolish, would we get involved or not? And I don't know if that ever got resolved, but that could be a discussion also.
We decided to
The,
get involved on complete demos.
The compelling economic argument could be supported by the investment that's been made in sewage in that
In what?
area. in order to, for example, the opportunity to acquire properties, to then turn them into high-density living of some kind, higher density living, might be, something that says, look, we get a return on the investment.
You're either going to-
And we
You're either
answer
gonna
other
get-
problems.
First of all, you're never gonna get any point of view that you're gonna get 100% buy-in.
Right.
Okay? So you can always have an argument that a given historical resource could be better used by demolishing it, putting up something else, changing it to commercial. There's always that argument. But then again, there's the other side of protection of historical resources. And I'll go back to my Delaware, Maryland Shore type of thing. The argument of commercial development and tearing down things won the day there. In the entire shoreline. Looks like Miami Beach now. The
The problem-
entire shoreline, it won the day.
Don't you think it was gradual, though? That it took place by increments over
It
time?
did take place, it did take place.
But what I'm saying,
It wasn't like it was,
seems,
it wasn't like it was one way one day and 5 years
Right.
later is another. And actually, it wasn't the only time I've been there because I have family and friends and go to the shore. So I've actually seen it kind of change. But it actually went 2 or 3 years ago. It's probably 5 or 6 years ago when I went down there. And all of a sudden, I said, it's totally different. I mean, it goes from a point that there's creep,
yeah.
to all of a sudden it's something different.
Yeah.
It's totally different.
Yeah, there hits a tipping point where it's like, okay, why should we bother saving what's left? So one of the things, I think we need to build a strong case for why it's a good idea to make Main Street a historic district. And you go through towns like Brewster and Dennis, and they've got significant parts of the town that are in the Kings Highway Historic District that are preserved. But that's not true. That's not the case in Orleans, really. I mean, we have a piece of it, but it's
The northern part.
yeah, it's obscure. It's not a main part of the town like Main Street is. And so
Right.
we don't really have, you have the potential for the loss that Charles is talking about until somebody, takes some action to not let that happen. I think demolition might be enough to do that, because if you can't knock those places down, then people are gonna continue to preserve them, one would hope. But if there's no protection at all, and if they're going to modernize everything by putting streetlights and sidewalks on both sides and a bike lane, then, you're pretty well on your way at that point to saying, why do we need to worry about whether that old house is still there?
Listen, the last two things we've come up in Nauset, none of those properties had to be torn down. The other one that we put a delay on, this one that we put a delay on, and they're all part of the historical structure. Demolition isn't gonna change anything with either one of them. In fact, the person who got up and spoke, Peter,
Hey.
yeah, about we have demolition, the answer back is it doesn't work.
No.
Yeah, we have it, but it doesn't work. Okay, I'll give you an exception, Ron would do this, I'll give you a couple of cases where it has worked, but on a macro basis, it does not work, it doesn't change things. And I don't think 18 months would make a difference. If you had to put 18 months and you had to put the place on the market, and you had to be, I don't know, but I don't see anything like that as passing, to be honest with you.
What's the demeanor of the town?
Well, the town doesn't have information, this is what frustrates me, the town
Yeah.
doesn't have the information clearly in terms of what's being suggested, what's being done. They have a group of people, basically 2 households, by the way. They have a group of people who are making presentations and allegations which are largely untrue, and they speak loudly and articulately.
So
And that's what's going on.
let's put our bylaw draft up online. We have to, we paid for it, it's public record.
Yeah, I
Well,
agree. There's no
And then we can
downside to
refer
that.
people to
Well,
it.
I'd like to have a discussion at least about changing the bylaw.
We can discuss it, but we've been discussing it for,
I understand, but something
For
new
years?
something new took place.
My personal opinion is I would disagree. I think that eliminating the additions and new construction from the bylaw would be a mistake.
Well, let me ask a question, Ron. Would you rather have a bylaw that is more limited or not have one at all?
Well, I'm not sure we can have a 40C bylaw that only regulates demolitions.
I think the last feedback we got is that the state committee, any bylaw, even a limited bylaw, is probably gonna be okay.
Well, what we were asking for is can we put in exemptions within the bylaw that are allowed under 40C legislation to be implemented after it goes into effect? Can we simply insert them into the bylaw?
So we're moving it, so if we
But
did
where
what I.
those- if the 40C doesn't say you can eliminate everything except demolitions.
Well, it doesn't say what you can eliminate.
It does, it has a list. These
Okay.
are the exemptions you can put in.
Okay, so we're saying that we wanna put additional exemptions in. It'll either be approved or not approved.
Yeah.
You know what?
I guess what I'm saying is no longer 40C.
I tend to
At
be a
all.
realist in terms of trying to get something accomplished and get it done. I have no instinct or no instinct of being Don Quixote in this type of stuff. If you have to make changes to get something through, then I think, my point of view, is you make the changes and you try to fight them through. If what the town wants is absolutely either no regulation or minimalist, then I think we should do minimalist to the largest degree possible. That's my
I guess
point
my
of view.
opinion is we are at that point now, from my point of view.
Yeah.
But I think what you're at right now, based on town communication, you're basically at a situation that you got a choice of doing nothing or trying to do something.
Well, however we define minimal, the proposal itself is up in the air now, and we're not sure whether it's supported by the select board. And if they say, look, we're sorry, but this is something that we agree, this has value, so have some, we encourage you to continue, or, well, there are other things we need to be thinking about when we plan the development of this community. Well, that's a different answer. So I think a conversation first there, maybe if we can complete this report,
I think that's,
is valuable.
personally, I think it's too soft approach. I think you need to come in with a very firm point of view, as opposed to throwing our hands up and saying, will you support us and what will you support us at? My intention would be to go in there with a very strong, focused point of view.
I don't object to that. No, I don't object to that at all. But at the end, the close is, you need to be behind this for
I
us to
understand,
go
but
further.
I think there's some things that we can and should do to help make that more likely to take place, including different amounts of lobbying beforehand.
I think to your point, Fran, support from the select board, this is my opinion, but Joan and I have been before them several times, and all of us have had conversations with individuals. My assessment right now is we don't have any support on the select board in terms of the district. There's nobody on the select board that has ever said, I think this is a great idea, I support it, I'm gonna support you on this. What we do have is we've had tepid acquiescence from the select board. They've said, okay, we've made our presentations, we've made our pitches, okay, well, we'll support you in going ahead and taking it to the next step. But nobody has ever come forward and said, I'm gonna support this. Now, the select board all sat there in that town meeting and watched a 2/3 vote turn down a $10,000 grant to just continue the studying. What impact is that gonna have on the previous tepid support that might have been there?
Well, I agree. I agree with you. I don't, Ron, know what to say to that, other than there at least has to be some finality that we get to.
Yeah.
And I think that's the place to go to get it, rather than to hope that we can, encourage the ascent of an amorphous, opposition right now.
No, but we could go before the select board with a strong, powerful presentation, and this is what we're gonna do, and that would be the end of it right there, because when that town meeting warrant goes before the town meeting, and that line, that all-important line that's right under the article is gonna say Select Board 050. And that's,
Yeah.
I think that, to try to make a much stronger pitch than we've ever made before to them at this point and in this short a time period. Maybe someday we'll be able to do that, or a future commission will be able to do that, but this year, next year, I'm skeptical.
So in the meantime, there's a master plan that's gonna roll out, right? That will have some say or some recommendations about that part of town. And,
Yeah.
and we won't be a part of it, or the district concept may not be a part of it. And so, I don't know what to say. It's terrible timing.
Well, I do think that if we go in front of the select board in the way in which Ron's saying, that it will absolutely fail and it's all over with.
Well, then maybe there has.
That's just my point of view. It doesn't mean I'm right, but that's just my point of view. I think I think the only possible answer is major aggressive campaigning. But I may be the only person who feels that way.
I sure would like to know what's going on in that planning group meeting, in terms of what's been discussed
Well,
conceptually.
by the way, I wanted to bring up a couple things. One person who spoke at town meeting said that we just decided to target development of East Orleans Main Street. So I went online to look at the minutes of the Economic Development Committee, of which she's chair, and the minutes, of course, weren't there. So I did a FOIA request and got the minutes. There's no discussion that I find,
Right.
of redeveloping that part of Main Street. So I don't know where this came from. I contacted the town, Mike Salitro, who's I guess he was planner and now he's something else, anyway. And he sent me the goals of the Economic Development Committee that are tangentially a part of Main Street. And there's nothing there about targeting Main Street for development. So I don't know where that comment came from or where it's supported.
Well, not only that, it was factually untrue that establishing a historic district there would have any negative impact on economic
Right.
development.
So my point of view is, I completely agree with everyone that people don't know. So I think we have a draft bylaw that's put it out there, and people have been clamoring for it on social media, saying, is there anywhere I can see this draft bylaw? So why should we always be sitting around saying, well, it's this, it's not that, it's this, and it's not that? You just say, this is what it
Here it
is.
is, go look at it.
What is the process of getting it on the website? Simply just
I just
submitting
have
it?
to tell them to do it.
Well, once we do it, we should be going into social media and say, check the website,
Yeah.
check the bylaw, that
Well,
it's out,
We can,
Right, and then
the
if
survey's
you
out there
think it
too.
ought to
We
be
can refer
completely
people to it.
changed,
Not
then we can do
completely,
it.
it's some lines. I think,
We can do it, but I think we have to put out there what the draft is now.
well, I think,
We got a draft, we got a map, we
well,
don't have the preliminary
you and
report,
I
but
are
let's put
in
it out
disagreement,
there.
because I strongly think that would be a mistake right now.
But I think we have been blindsided because we've had this draft,
Yeah, and the
and
draft
we haven't
is,
put it online because we wanted to have it in context with the whole preliminary report. But now we have all these people who have no information.
right, Charles, the draft is, I mean, it's pretty minimal. I mean, I understand what you're saying, you could still, you
says
could take
draft,
out
it's
additions.
watermarked draft.
But you could take out additions and new construction, but it's pretty minimal now. Those are the only other two things besides demolition. There's no windows, there's no colors, there's none of the stuff that people said at that meeting is in the draft bylaw. So they'd have a hard time finding it. It's not there. So I don't see the harm. I can hear what you're saying, that, you know, they'll find additions but, you know, maybe you want to give them something that they could scratch out to make it even more
Well,
minimalistic.
the town is basically fighting, there are people here are fighting the proverbial, I don't know if this is politically correct, the bogeyman, that's what they're doing. And they believe at this point in time, that it'll help hurt commercial development, it'll hurt value, people won't be able to manage their homes. I mean, there's all these things that are out there that people think it is. I'm sensitive that people feel strongly about it. And my only point of view is to, actually what my proposal was, but you know, I'm just one person. My proposal is to have it out there, pull the addition and pull the,
So you're saying
No,
rewrite the
let me-
bylaw
let
and
me-
then put it out there? Okay.
that would take seconds, that would take minutes to do that.
No.
But all I'm saying, let me just say what I'm saying,
Okay.
is to take those two components and have it as a separate edition and say, we also want to discuss these things at the meeting, at the meetings we have with people in the town. And if there's consensus to bring it into the bylaw, we will. If there's not consensus, we won't. In other words, I just would keep it as a separate type of thing, but there. I'm not saying not have it there. I'm saying as a separate type of thing, and it's going to relate to feedback that we get. That strategically, that's what I would do.
I would say, we have a document that has been worked on for years and years and years, reviewed twice by Mike Ford, reviewed by Eric Drain multiple times, modified by our committee many, many times. Nothing is ever just. You can't just take out this and that. You can't. You have to redo the definitions, you have to move things around, you have to change the language all over it. It would be a complete rewrite to, quote, just make it demolitions.
Okay, it's just.
And we would have a completely different opinion from the Massachusetts Historical Commission, who gave us a non-binding advisory opinion.
Okay. Yeah, hey, once again, we're not in agreement, but that's where we're at. Now, if you did put it out there, I would also have it with a caveat that if there are components of this people didn't want to do, and it comes out in the meetings and in the dialogue we have, the applicable changes would show up in a final document.
Right, it's a draft, and it's really a draft.
Yeah, but people, I'm reading the stuff that are out there. People aren't talking factually. People are saying there's deed restrictions. People are saying there's
Yeah.
Secretary of the Interior standards on individual houses. And they're not saying maybe, they're saying factually that's there.
I know.
And so I'm responding to misinformation, and actually, and I'll say it, absolute lies about what's been said. I'm responding to that.
So none of that misinformation is in even the current bylaw, though. So, I mean, people aren't gonna find those kinds of things in there. They're not in there. I mean, they're gonna have to object to something.
They'll find that they're not in there.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, I mean, I think it helps to have the document out there, and you know, it might not be a bad thing to say. I mean, I think we want to say this is a draft, and I mean, we've been saying that all along. It's a draft. We're going to have public meetings, and then we're going to come up with a final version of this after the public meetings, and we've got input from everybody.
But Ed, nothing that we're saying is sinking. The same small group of people that talked when we had the meeting back there in the spring, in the winter, are the same people that spoke at town meeting, are the same people that spoke at CPC, are the same people that are on social media right now. And they have their own set of facts.
Yeah, we're not going to convince those people.
We're not gonna change, I wouldn't even, the fact is, there's gonna be people who are against it. They're against it, okay, I understand. But they speak loudly.
Are we in agreement, just to step back a minute, are we in agreement that we're not pursuing Maytown meeting?
I thought that we made that decision at the
I do
Historic
too.
District Study Committee.
I think we need to get that on the table and clear up. We're
Yeah.
talking about a longer term
Yeah.
issue, not May. Is everybody?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm in agreement, I'm in agreement.
I don't see how we
Yeah, okay, I just,
legitimately could do it.
no,
I mean-
I agree, yeah.
Herculean effort, maybe,
Yeah.
but that would also mean we magically found money to get, so
Yeah.
Eric could finish the preliminary study report.
Yeah,
I mean, I think we ought to be trying to finish the preliminary study report as soon as we can and get that out there, because we're gonna need as much time as we can have to, if we're ever gonna do any kind of, public relations effort. We can't really start it until we have that, so I think we ought to have that out there as soon as we can.
But I think what you're pointing out is we are in the public relations realm right now.
Yeah.
It's just we're in the public relations realms with nothing to show
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, right,
much.
we don't have the strong documentation to say, this is what we're proposing, not all the crazy stuff you've been hearing or the inaccurate stuff.
Well, you're gonna have to turn around point of views. I mean, I think clearly, I don't think there's any chance that money for Eric would get approved by CPC without very active articulation and arguments, and I'm not sure it would be even then. Because people heard what got said, most people don't know the underlying facts.
yeah. But that's my second point is support and the services of Eric. The grant application that we've submitted was for implementation of the district,
I mean, the second one,
the second one,
The
the
current
the one that's gonna be coming up.
right.
Now, I think basically, and Charles, you would know better than I, but given the fact that we're not pursuing it, and given the fact that they've already had people speaking publicly against it, we're not gonna get that money.
Well, you might have to change the application. Which you can do. There's nothing that stops amendment of an application at this stage of the game. But I happen to agree with you, without very active and strong interaction about what the facts are, you're not gonna get people to sign off on it. Now, is it possible you could get a that some of that money could still be given, but it's nowhere near the layup that it was before. Not even close.
No, they're looking, just like the select board, they sat and looked at their application. It was the application that they approved being rejected by a 2/3 vote. And that's practically unheard of.
Yeah.
In the history of CPC.
So, Ron, are you
Well,
saying?
no, the same thing
Same thing
happened.
happened to pickleball.
Yeah,
Well,
same thing
yeah,
happened to
but I
pickleball,
say
and a year
practically.
after it got approved.
Yeah, and it did, because they have a constituency, a large constituency, pickleball. There's a lot of pickleball enthusiasts in town. There are not a lot of historic preservation enthusiasts.
Ron, correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't that CBC application for the implementation money been presented at the same town meeting that the bylaw would have been presented at? Because it's within it,
Yeah.
So shouldn't would it make sense for us to withdraw that? Or is there no CPC approval process between now and, let's say, if we, in some scenario, we end up going in the fall of next year, there wouldn't be another CPC meeting to approve that if we withdrew the application?
Well, there probably would be a fall meeting,
Oh.
but, no, I think allowing that application to go forward as it is now, I think you're right, it should be withdrawn. Now, whether we could modify it in some way, that's another story.
I mean, if we know we're not going to ask for the historic district in the upcoming town meeting, then I'm not sure it even makes sense to ask for the implementation money for the thing we're not asking to be implemented yet. You know what I'm saying?
So procedure.
Well, the implementation money was only to be used if it got approved. So if it didn't get approved, the money would be given back.
We're not even going to ask for it to be approved in the May meeting.
Yeah, but it could be approved. Don't forget, the money's there for a year.
Yeah.
I mean, there's money, I think about we have how much money hanging out there right now that no money's been spent, they got it, yeah. that's gotten approved on the archaeological thing.
Right,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
right, 25,000. But I guess what I'm saying is though, it's kind of, I don't know how logical it is to ask for the money to implement something, and we're not asking for the thing to be implemented. Although,
Yeah, but there's timelines here.
yeah, right,
I mean, you can't, I mean, the reality is, something gets done, 2 months later, the money comes available, and it's for the next year. So,
Yeah.
you know, if you miss a timeline, you're gone.
Yeah, so you're saying if we somehow decided to go forward with this and got on the November town meeting, that money that would be approved in CPC, that would be effective July 1st, 20?
No. If we did fall town meeting of next fall, the money would be available somewhere around November, December, January, something like, you know, somewhere in that time frame.
So, I'm confused. Then does that mean we don't have to ask for it now then, is what I'm getting at? We could wait until a future CPC meeting to ask for this particular application, or no?
We can pull it. I'm not sure I would, but we
Yeah.
can pull it.
I mean, you could use it as a proxy for the district and try to build a case around that application, but you know,
I think you gotta be careful. I really do think we're step by step walking into a situation where we're giving up. That's what I think. And I think that's where we're heading. Now, I think there's a weariness that this has gone on for a long period of time, and there's almost despair that we got ambushed and presented with stuff and with non-factual stuff that decisions were made on. So I understand the emotions about where we're at. But I think we're slowly walking, not slowly, quickly walking into a situation of basically giving it up.
yeah, well, the other side of that is recognizing reality.
I think
Yeah, I
we're
don't
facing
agree
reality.
with, I don't agree with the emotional. I think it's a matter of stepping back and taking a realistic, long-range look of where we started, where we've come from, and where we are now, and the events that have happened, and what the practical realities are of moving ahead to protect the historic character of this town. I don't think there's anything to do with emotions. I think it's, what's the best way forward to have the greatest impact possible on fulfilling our charge and protecting the town. I think it's as simple as that.
I'm just not sure how that's gonna happen if the district thing gets pulled at this point. Because if it gets pulled at this point in time, we'll probably all be dead and buried by the time it comes back again.
Oh, absolutely, and it may be, and looking around, there are, how many historic districts are you aware of that have been created recently? I think it's not just an Orleans issue, it's a bigger issue.
Chatham.
You know,
Chatham did one
Chatham had a
relatively
National Register district, and that's
recently.
and that's the latest, and it's, all the other districts on the Cape are old.
Yeah.
We've never established one here. Is there a reason for that? I think we need to make a decision on how best we can move ahead to fulfill our charge. If it's a district, fine. I think we've gotten some very strong signals lately that may not be the case. The vote that was taken is very similar to the vote that was taken in 1996 when it was soundly rejected. But now we have current evidence, and I think to ignore that or to try to explain it away, yeah, there was misinformation presented, but I don't think that was the only reason that this was. And we saw evidence of that. We saw there was a comment by somebody that was afraid, well, yeah, I understand it's limited and it's not going to regulate paint, but these things can always creep. And they can. They can. That's a legitimate reason for somebody to oppose the
And it was described as, quote, a hurdle
And-
to develop Main Street.
The-
It is a hurdle.
The misinformation fell on sympathetic ears. I think that's what we have to recognize, that
Yeah, yeah.
there was not a lot of sentiment in the other direction.
Okay, well, we've got our work cut out
Beat the
for
horse
us.
to death. Yeah.
Yeah, but Joan, you've made a suggestion, and I think we need to make a decision, whether we post the current bylaw.
Well, it would be there as a point of reference, at least for
I
any
think we
further
should-
discussion, be a public document.
I move we ask the Historic District Study Committee to post the map and the bylaw
Second,
with caveats.
Right, with an explanation that it's a draft and that it would not be.
And put it
yeah,
back within the document,
Yeah.
not attached to it.
Yeah,
So you can't possibly print it without.
right, without the caveat that says this is a draft and it was subject to further input from the public.
Yeah.
okay, motion made and seconded, in favor, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
Opposed.
410. Okay, I think we're done here.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay.
I think we all go out for a drink now.